There's something about a fight that stirs something deep in our DNA. Maybe it's instinct, maybe it's our primal roots whispering through all the noise of modern life. Either way, we're drawn to it, especially when the fighters are our primate cousins. And people just seem drawn to this whole human versus great ape topic. And people usually talk about gorillas or chimpanzees when comparing them to humans. But today, let's talk about another great ape against a human here, the orangutan. And don't let that mellow face fool you. They have a grip force that could put Eddie Halls to shame and have arms long enough to hug a tree. So which human shall we put against the orangutan? Well, let's reverse time a bit here and put up our battle-hardened brother from the Ice Age, the Neanderthal. Yeah, they squared off against saber-toothed cats and woolly mammoths. But could a Neanderthal 1v1 an orangutan and win? Well, people, you clicked on this video because you want to know who would win in a fight between an orangutan and a Neanderthal, and how would a battle like this even look like? Well, I'm here to give y'all an actual answer and not some 50-50 nonsense response. But before we begin, I would really appreciate it if y'all subscribed, liked this video, and commented what y'all think. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm and would really mean a lot to me. And if we reach 100,000 subscribers, I will do a special video for y'all, whether it's me doing tug of war against a big cat, testing my strength against the gorillas, or something like that. Sounds fun? Let's achieve that. But enough of the self-promo. Let's establish some ground rules for this brawl. Let's say this fight is between an angry male orangutan and an angry male Neanderthal who want to duke it out. And by the way, both of them are gonna be unarmed, so no saying that a Neanderthal could poke the orangutan with a spear or something like that, okay? They're throwing hands. And where shall this battle be? Well, let's say it takes place in an open field, so pretty much even terrain here for the both of them, okay? Sounds good? Now let's find out which of these primates wins a fight. Size and physique. The Neanderthal. These dudes weren't out there sipping cold brews and scrolling their phones. They were battling cave lions and had to drag large carcasses back to their tribe for sometimes miles on end. You see, Neanderthals predominantly inhabited all over Europe during the Ice Age and lived in small clans between 10 to 30 people. And the Neanderthal did not use coffee to wake up in the morning. Just the sheer fear of getting eaten by some large carnivore would. Yeah, while you wear clothes and drive cars, they wore pelts from the animals they took down and used their good old-fashioned footmobile. Yeah, they win the back in my day contest. So just how big was a Neanderthal? Well, the average adult male likely weighed around 170 pounds and stood about 5'6". So yeah, they weren't really super tall compared to modern humans, but what they lacked in height, they made up for with brute density. Their bodies were compact and stocky. In fact, when compared to a human pound for pound, they supported a much more robust barrel-shaped ribcage, broader shoulders, a wider pelvis, thicker neck vertebrae, and proportionally shorter limbs. So what does all that mean? Well, their whole body was more adept at taking damage compared to humans, and their bones were more stress resistant. Think about it like this. Our ancient human ancestors were built like marathon runners, while the Neanderthal supported a more powerlifter build to throw down. Even though the Neanderthal could still run a lot, don't get me wrong. But here's something unique about the Neanderthal that actually shows off a little bit more of their ape-like origin. The Neanderthal had a broader skull than modern humans and a more robust jaw structure. In fact, recent analysis show that Neanderthals often use their mouths to grab onto and manipulate objects. So they often use their mouth kind of like a third hand. So they probably wouldn't hesitate to bite something, especially if their opponent got really close. But speaking of ape-like qualities, how about we turn to the Neanderthal's challenger, the Bornene orangutan? Yeah, these things are a special kind of primate. This one is built different compared to a lot of other primates. Orangutans are like nature's long-limbed jungle ghosts. I mean, seriously, have you seen their alien-like arms? I mean, they are extremely long for their size. Yeah, their arms are so absurdly long and flexible, they could scratch their ankles while hanging on a tree. In fact, they have great functional strength. Orangutans can climb trees with ease, snap branches like tissue paper, and have a grip strength that puts the average humans to shame. Alright, but just how large was the Bornene orangutan? What is the Neanderthal working with? Well, the average wild adult male clocks in around 165 pounds and stands just under 5 feet tall. So yeah, the Neanderthal would obviously have the height advantage, along with a slight weight advantage, though nothing really considerable. But here's the thing, the orangutan's body, while strong, is highly specialized for an arboreal way of life and quadrupedal locomotion on the ground, and that comes with trade-offs. You see, their knees point inwards, their pelvis is tilted, and their center of gravity is high and forward facing. That's great for swinging from tree to tree and walking quadrupedally, but not so much for standing up and grappling. In fact, they have well-developed prehensile fingers and feet, which are good for grabbing onto branches and objects, but only just okay at moving around on the ground. So when they walk on land, they do default to a quadrupedal position, yet tend to actually walk more awkwardly than ground-dwelling apes like gorillas. This is because of their arboreal anatomy. So sure, they can stand upright, but their anatomy was not really built for it. If they did try to stand up with a Neanderthal and wrestle it, well, they're gonna be wobbly, easy to off balance, and one strong shove might even send them to the dirt. This again is because of their knees and where their weight is actually being distributed. But that does not mean they're fragile, because their bodies are compact and reinforced. You see, they have the typical ape build, but perhaps a little more on the wiry end. They got thick joints, stocky, stout necks, and a dense frame that supports a high amount of fast twitch fibers. And don't sleep on their skull structure either. Orangutans have thicker craniums and more robust jaws than humans. And yes, that includes Neanderthals. Now, their bison might not be perhaps lion tier, but their canines when compared to Neanderthals are not only sharper and longer, but their entire jaw structure is more robust. So perhaps on a bite-to-bite basis, the orangutan would be able to deal more damage. But listen people, physique is only half the battle. How both the Neanderthal and orangutan fight plays a huge role in this battle scenario as well. So this brings me on to my last point, which is weaponry and fighting IQ. Alright, so this is gonna be primate against primate here. They both have the same weapons, you know, hands and bites. So perhaps a lot of hands are gonna be thrown, but they do actually fight very different. And this is where things get interesting. So let's start with our primitive brothers. When it comes to the Neanderthal, we're not looking at some caveman club swinger from a cartoon. This was a battle-hardened apex hominid, an ice age survivor that earned its scars dragging carcasses through the snow and defending their tribes against cave lions. And trust me, it did not do that by being dumb. The Neanderthal had a lot more real combat IQ than the orangutan. Now yes, even though the orangutan is one of the smartest animals alive here, it really pales in comparison to the Neanderthal. Not only did the Neanderthal actually have to fend off and coordinate attacks, they also knew how to dispatch an animal. They essentially would know where to target, figure out an animal's rhythm / find openings, and how to adapt better under pressure compared to the orangutan. Now this would translate to them being better problem solvers and could maybe exploit / bait the orangutan into doing a certain movement towards the Neanderthal's favor. You know, kind of like what humans do when facing against dogs. But aside from their intelligence, the Neanderthal, just like modern humans, have a lot better muscle control and more dexterous hands / wrists than apes. Essentially, the Neanderthal could manipulate stuff better with their hands and do a lot more precise and calculated movements than the orangutan. And unlike other primates, Neanderthals, again just like humans, could not only form a proper fist and punch, but also have the ability to choke an opponent and also grab onto a limb and dislocate it or something to that degree. They essentially would have a lot more effective strike mechanics. And there's just one more plus, okay? Their stamina. Neanderthals had a huge lung capacity and would have great endurance compared to apes. So it would have better cardio and could probably last longer in a fight. But now let's flip the script and talk about its opponents. The orangutan, a wild card with brute force, freakish arms, and just some natural weapons that give it an inherent advantage. Now to start, this isn't King Kong. It's not some jungle gladiator. Orangutans are powerful, yes, but they don't really face against any dangerous animals in their daily lives. So they aren't really super battle hardened or anything like that, but they do bring that wild primal build into the mix. Now where the orangutan really stands out is its grip strength. They've evolved to hang and swing through trees for hours a day. So their forearms, fingers, and hands are incredibly strong. If they manage to perhaps grab the Neanderthal, that grip could be pretty hard to shake off. Now what the orangutan would do next is bite. Yes, orangutans have a decent bite force and long primitive canines. Their jaws, as mentioned earlier, are stronger than the Neanderthals, but aren't really built to kill like a lion's. If it lands a bite, could deal some pain, deep punctures, and maybe shear some flesh. However, it's not going to be really fight ending. It would still hurt a lot though. But remember, before it can bite and grab, it has to close that gap. Now, orangutans have pretty good explosive power, probably more so than the Neanderthals, but their striking is pretty questionable. Now, yes, orangutans have very long arms and whatnot, but yeah, when they do strike, it ends up being more of slapping slash swatting that really aren't controlled or accurate. In fact, they actually tend to strike less than other apes do, like chimpanzees. And this is because of their rangy, tree-dwelling build. So orangutans very much prefer to grab onto their opponents and bite. But don't get it twisted. Once they grab onto their opponents, it would be very hard to shake them off. But here's the thing. Orangutans don't really brace, cover up, or guard their face. Their fighting style is reactive, not strategic, and given their hunched stance and shorter legs, their mobility and stability aren't really great on flat terrain, which might make them easy to off balance if the Neanderthal keeps applying pressure to them. That said, they do have a thing going for them, their brutish durability. Apes in general tend to have denser bones, stronger ligaments, and shorter, stouter necks to support a thicker skull. So this would mean that the orangutan would be harder to knock out and concuss. So perhaps they would be kind of like Rocky Balboa. Even though they might get hit, they could get back up, and given their explosive power, they could maybe fluster the Neanderthal and grab it quickly. But would the Neanderthal even allow that to happen? Could the Neanderthal use its superior intelligence, dexterous limbs, and endurant build to show why hominids rule? Or could the orangutan use its freakishly long arms, strong grip force, powerful bites, and explosive power to show why the Neanderthal went extinct? Well, people, I think it's about time we determine a verdict. Alright, we have our stats. So who wins in a fight between a Neanderthal and a Bornean orangutan? Well, people, given all the information I presented, I think the Neanderthal would win. Don't get it twisted, it's not going to be an easy fight, but the Neanderthal really has a lot going for it. It's a lot more battle hardened and has superior fighting IQ. In essence, it would know where to target, how to time strikes, and it can likely exploit more openings and adapt to the situation a lot faster. Remember this, the Neanderthal actually knew how to dispatch an animal, so it would really be no stranger to putting down something like the orangutan, right? Our Ice Age brother had a lot more dexterous limbs and can control its movements better. It also had a way better land-based build. The orangutan, in my opinion, is kind of fodder at equal weight. I mean, its whole body is adapted mainly for a tree-dwelling lifestyle. The way its hips are positioned, the way its knees are pointed inwards, and its center of gravity is just really not all there. Like we mentioned earlier, the orangutan kind of moves awkwardly on land, especially when compared to other apes like chimpanzees or gorillas. It essentially would be less agile than them and would be actually kind of easy to knock over. Now, yes, they wouldn't be necessarily super easy to put down. They could probably get a bite in or two at the Neanderthal, but they tire out pretty quickly. The Neanderthal had a lot better cardio. So if the orangutan could not instantly or very quickly break a bone of the Neanderthal, which would be very unlikely to happen, as the battle goes on, it goes more and more into the Neanderthal's favor. Basically, there's really nothing the orangutan could do to harm the Neanderthal in a lethal way without the Neanderthal really just retaliating back, and so on. Remember, I'm going to repeat this again, Neanderthal was a lot more battle hardened and actually knew how to dispatch an animal. So thank you so much for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and feel free to check out the rest of my content.